For our Mother's Day episode, we have decided to have a discussion about something us moms might be struggling with, including me. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, has been in our psyche for a couple of years. We have heard this term like it's some disability, while other people think it's the next evolution. We have different takes on this matter, and today we would like to demystify this and try to understand ADHD individuals are just like you and me. This is Jeanette Ipapo-Tuason of Chicdriven Chats, and we're here to give you your best life in bullet points. Our guest today is a lawyer, entrepreneur, investor, mentor, runner, and community builder. She is the woman behind Unlocking ADHD, a nonprofit organization that is based in Singapore that is helping countless individuals learn and get more support for ADHD. Let us all welcome Moonlake Lee. Hey, Moon.
Hi, Jeanette. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, ADHD. Tell us something about. I know that you have a first-hand experience with ADHD. Can you give us like a background?
Okay. Well, ADHD is really an issue of not being able to regulate ourselves well. So I think where it impairs our lives is, when we are, maybe too hyperactive, too impulsive, or maybe too inattentive. And then this gets in the way of our studies, our productivity at work, our relationships, and how we function. So essentially, ADHD is really not being able to get things done on a consistent basis. It's been treated as a learning impairment by some, and also, mental health condition by others. So it's a pretty complex condition.
Okay. So I know for a fact because Moon and I are forum mates. You have a first-hand experience on this. Would you like to tell us how you started and why you have unlocking ADHD?
Actually, it all started with my daughter. That's how, for most of us as parents, we hear about ADHD. It's through our kids. My daughter was diagnosed when she was 15 years old. At that time, she was taking her secondary 3 year in Singapore, and she was failing 5 out of 8 subjects in school. So it really was quite a bleak outcome for her in the future. If she continued to go on at that rate, most likely she'd be looking at vocational school. And yet we knew that she was a smart girl, had lots of potential. So it was very frustrating for her and also for us to know that there's so much potential, but how come it's not being shown in the report book and in terms of academics? And it also affected her mentally, emotionally, because she felt stupid. And a lot of teachers, the tutors were all complaining about her. And of course, as parents, you worry about the future. So at that time, a good friend of mine had the daughter diagnosed with ADHD. And when the daughter had taken medication and, was actually doing much better in school. So in desperation, she had less than a year before the O-levels exam. I took her to see the psychiatrist. She was diagnosed with ADHD, primarily inattentive. And with medication, with support from us and her own hard work, in about 3 years from the time that she was diagnosed, she actually managed to make it to dental school in university last year. So she just started her first year in dentistry. And, 3 years prior, the time that she was diagnosed, it would have been completely out of our imagination.
Okay.
And so that was my experience with her, yes.
Yeah. But I know you were also diagnosed, right?
Yes, I was. In the course of trying to support her and find out more about ADHD, I realized that actually it's a very strong genetic link, that if a child has ADHD, it's a good chance that 1 or 2 parents could have it. But I figured, at that time, I was about 49, 50 years old. What's the big deal, right? I've made it through life so far. So I didn't do much about it. But a year later, at the age of 50, I was completely overwhelmed with life. I tend to take on more than I can chew. So I was really struggling to stay afloat. And a good friend of mine had just gotten diagnosed with ADHD. His daughter had been diagnosed. And he said that, when he had treatment, life became so much clearer for him. He understood himself better. He was able to make good decisions in terms of his business and so on. And I thought, I desperately need that, So I thought maybe it's time to go for help. And that's
Okay.
why I went forward to get a diagnosis from a psychiatrist.
Okay. And how did that change you? What were the steps that you took to address your
I
ADHD? We'll start with that.
I think the most important was, first of all, to understand and accept that I have it.
Yes.
Because I was
Okay.
still in a very much of a limbo situation at first. Do I or don't I have it? Because I think probably I was on the mild side. So I wasn't very sure. And people around me kept on saying, no, you don't have it. You're too organized. You're the most organized person I know.
Mhm.
And look at what you've done so far, right? There's no way. So there's a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions. So it's to be able to understand it and feel comfortable, with who I am and my symptoms and, how they've impacted my life. So there was a period of also looking back, reflecting and coming to terms and being more compassionate to myself. It
Okay.
actually unexpectedly helped my relationship with my husband too, because in the
Okay.
past we'd fight about some of the ways the symptoms displayed in my life, and he kept on
Mm-hmm.
saying that there's something wrong with me, like what's wrong with you? I've got a character flaw. So it didn't make me feel good about myself. But knowing
Mm-hmm.
that there is a certain extent it's part of my wiring,
Mm-hmm.
um, it doesn't exactly absolve me of responsibility, but it relieves me of some of the self-blaming that I had over the years.
Okay.
So that was important. Yeah,
So for you, the biggest impact of learning that you have ADHD was being more kind to yourself.
definitely, definitely. But I think it
Okay.
goes beyond that. It's not
Okay.
just accepting oneself, the strength
Mm-hmm.
and the things that I could do better, but also learning how to really put measures in place to help me live a better life. Be a
Okay.
better
And what
mom, be
kind
a
of
better
measure?
entrepreneur. Okay, an example would be because I
Yeah.
tend to overdo things. Again, is that impulsivity in me and the hyperactivity. So I tend to take on too many things. So the
Me
first thing is
too.
being mindful. The first thing is being mindful that this is an issue. Okay,
Okay.
and then to stop short, and then to reassess and say, do I really need to do this? Do I need to
Yeah.
say yes to yet another thing? Right? What are my priorities? And besides doing that, I actually learned from my daughter. I started putting alarms on my phone. In the past, I only used the phone for like to wake up, the alarm. But now I actually have alarms for
Mm-hmm.
meetings to remind me a couple of minutes before a meeting, to remind me to get out of the house for the next meeting, to remind me to sleep. I just started doing that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
using phones, using timers so that I can keep track, because one of the symptoms for ADHD actually is time blindness, not being aware about time passing because we get so engrossed in something. That's called
Okay.
hyperfocus. Yeah.
Okay. So you did that changes. And then for your daughter who was diagnosed at 15, what was the biggest measure that you took for her?
I think actually the biggest measure is the unexpected one. Many parents, when
Okay.
they hear ADHD, they freak out, they panic,
Mm-hmm.
they think, oh boy, medication. That is important, by the way, but it's not the only thing. We were looking
Mm-hmm.
at coaching and behavior therapy, but the most important fundamental thing actually is the relationship with the child. We tend to overlook that. And because
Mm-hmm.
there are so many things, at that point in time and even in the future, that are hard things that need to be done, the collaboration and cooperation between parent and child is so important. And if you don't have a good foundation in terms of the relationship, it's very, very hard to get these accepted and implemented and have the child work together with you.
Okay. So let's say, for example, I guess being Filipino and being Singaporean have different we have different cultures, different cultural aspects. But for your daughter being diagnosed at 15, were there any effects in terms of how she was how the school or her classmates view her?
Yeah, there was a big difference. Prior to that, she was actually quite well known in the school as the kid who always forgot something, handed in homework late, or lost the homework, and just didn't bring her books to school. It
Yeah.
got to the stage even other classmates' parents knew about that.
Mm-hmm.
So she definitely wasn't a favorite among her teachers. But after the diagnosis, she started taking her medication regularly. She started getting more structure from me and from her coach. Then not only did her academics improve, but she was more on the ball. And then the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
responded positively. And then she, of course, felt very, validated. So it's a very positive upward cycle rather than negative
Okay.
downward cycle. Yes.
I think maybe unlike before where, it was so taboo. I think there's a lot of people saying that, they have ADHD, made a lot of sense, that they were having traits. One of the issues that I had was I didn't want my kids to be labeled. And then I didn't want it to be uh something sort of like a chip in their shoulder. But how are you guys dealing with people that have that kind of mindset?
Actually, we're part of the same mindset too initially, because I
Mhm.
suspected my daughter had ADHD when she was 10. I actually went to the
Okay.
trouble of trying to find out about assessments. I had
Mm-hmm.
a thick, printout of all the questions to answer about her. I found out how much
Mm-hmm.
it cost, which is a heck of a lot of money, even those
Yes, it
days.
is.
And, when my husband and I discussed it, and really, in the end, we didn't do anything about it because we didn't want to label her so young,
Mm-hmm.
literally. So I completely understand where many parents are coming from because I was there. But
Mm-hmm.
now at years later, right, about 8 years later, at this stage in my life, one of the things that my daughter told me, she said, Mom, I wish she had done something about that earlier. It would have saved her a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pain and
Okay.
heartache, in her the subsequent years. And I
Mm-hmm.
agree. And that's one thing I regret, because actually labels are not necessarily a bad thing. They could be a good
Mm-hmm.
thing because, number one, it gets you the help you need. If
Yeah.
you have a label, like a proper diagnosis, you know exactly what you have. You can go and research it. You can look for support groups. You can, find like-minded people. You can, read books about it. So that actually empowers you to do something to help yourself. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's maybe,
Okay.
yeah, it's an excuse sometimes, at least for
Yeah.
ourselves at that age. Yeah.
So, like for me, one of this, I know that you strongly believe in medicating and using. It's a big step for you in your experience, but there are some parents that are a little bit hesitant with medication. And if they are, what do you guys usually suggest they do, or what other interventions are there if they decide that they? Because I know medication is not for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, what we say, we're not really like fixed on one or two tools alone. The research says that actually a multimodal approach is the best. So what that means
Okay.
is not just medication alone. It has to be in conjunction with other things like therapy,
Mm-hmm.
coaching, lifestyle changes, behavior management. Because we always tell our community, pills don't teach skills.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it was
Okay.
just medication alone, once you stop it, and if you didn't do anything in the meantime, nothing changes. You're back to square one.
Okay.
So you have to do other things. And that being said, though, we also know that not everyone can take medication. It's
Yeah.
effective in about 70-80% of people, but there's still a percentage that doesn't respond well, or have allergies or
Mhm.
medical conditions. So it's important to do the other things too, together. So one of them is, if the child has mental health issues or emotional issues, is to go and see a therapist, a psychologist, to get the therapy needed. Anxiety and depression are two of the most common. And you
Yeah.
know what? We want to address it early on rather than let it get bigger and get more severe. The other thing that
Yeah.
really helps for certain age groups, particularly from teenagers to adult, is actually coaching. We call it
Coaching.
executive functioning coaching. Not very well
Yes.
known still in our part of the world, but quite established in the US and UK. Um,
Mm.
because the way ADHD works, the wiring affects the front part of our brain. It's called the prefrontal
Yeah.
cortex.
Yes.
That's where the executive functioning lies. It's almost like the GPS of the brain, or the
Yeah.
conductor of the orchestra. So if things are not working as they should, then that's where we trip up. So coaching
Mhm.
helps to help us plan and organize things better, manage our emotions, put in certain scaffolding to manage things like time blindness, to help
Yeah.
us get started on task and complete tasks. So that's where the coaching comes in. That's helpful and can make a difference in our lives. And then
So,
exercise for sure,
yeah.
and
Yes,
sleep. Okay,
definitely.
getting enough sleep. Yes, yeah.
So, like, actually, one of my son, who is 22 and is graduating from psychology, actually said that most of the kids now he feels have ADHD, and he thinks like maybe, in my opinion or in my conspiracy theory mind, maybe, as I mentioned, it might be an evolution thing, right? Because how fast the computers and how fast the times are, the learnings and stuff. Kids might need might need that kind of mindset or mind view to be able to keep up. That's why they're always fast and can't, in attention or something like that. Anyway, so there's some people who don't believe in ADHD, which is they think it's some sort of thing concocted by the pharmaceutical so that they can sell the medicine. What do you think of that?
I like to quote Dr. Edward Hallowell. He's a guru in the area of ADHD because he's a psychiatrist who specializes in that. And he also is an ADHD
Mm-hmm.
himself. Okay. Dr. Hallowell said he used to go for conferences and people asked him, Dr. Hallowell, do you believe in medication? And he said, it's not a religion. Okay. It's a fact, right? So same thing about ADHD, whether one believes it exists or it doesn't. The fact is that it does. It affects about 5% of people globally. So if it was something intangible or not existent, it wouldn't impact and impair so many lives.
Yeah,
And there is research on this. But people ultimately choose to believe what they want.
they want to
But we have
believe.
to deal
Yeah,
with but we have to deal with the practical consequences, right? And for
yeah.
my daughter's case, it really was a difference between vocational school and where she is now.
Okay, so if I were if I'm a mom and I have a child, what are the red flags that I should look at before, so that I can go to like a psychiatrist or a development pediatrician to have my child assessed?
Well, first of all, for ADHD symptoms, there are three main kinds of presentations. The first one I think most people are familiar with is the hyperactivity impulsivity. And that's very
Okay.
common, especially for little boys, because they tend to be disruptive in school
Yes.
and they get flagged early. That's why boys are flagged about 3 to 4 times more than girls in terms of
Okay.
ADHD. But the other type, the other presentation is inattention. And that
Okay.
tends to be a bit more common in girls, but boys have it too. So what that means
Mm-hmm.
is that they tend to be more spacey,
Mm-hmm.
disorganized, scattered, messy, lost in their thoughts. A lot of the
Okay.
activity, the hyperactivity happens in the head. So it's not so physically evident.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important to flag out early too. Otherwise, they can progress without it being caught. Like my daughter was only 15 when she was diagnosed. And there's so many women that get diagnosed either as young adults or as mothers or even at my age at 50, right?
I
But think
probably
about
have
all
it
the
too.
years. You know what? No big deal. Join the tribe.
I
I think
I probably
there's so
have it
many
too.
strengths in the condition too. But these are the two main presentations. The third is
Mm-hmm.
a combination of the two, which many people have
Okay.
as well. That's the most common. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's to do with not being able to stop talking, not being able to stop moving, regulating oneself,
Mm-hmm.
constantly interrupting, not being able to sit down and learn. And that's why parents get so concerned, right? Because it affects
Yeah.
academics. Yeah, but there's a lot of associated conditions with it. We call these comorbidities. One of them is dyslexia. So dyslexia
Yeah.
is pretty common for many ADHDs. So is ASD, autism spectrum disorder. So those are
Mm-hmm.
some of the other things to watch out for. And then from the emotional side, again, if a child is prone to have anxiety or be depressed, right? That you might
Mm-hmm.
want to consider, could ADHD be underlying if they meet the other symptoms that were mentioned earlier?
Okay, so you mentioned ASD and other comorbidities. Um, what is the difference between ADHD and being in the spectrum?
There are some differences, but also some overlaps. They both struggle with executive functioning. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the similarities. With ADHDs, they can hyper focus, as I mentioned, if something interests them or is novel enough. With children with ASD, many of them are, able to do repetitive things, right? In a way, sort of focus without getting bored, which is opposite for the ADHDs. But both sides have their strength. There's a certain measure
Yeah.
of rigidity for kids with ASD that is lesser so for ADHD. So again, there are similarities and there are differences, but I think the best is to really speak with a mental health professional or a pediatrician to be able to clarify more on the symptoms.
Okay. So let's say, for example, the child gets, my child gets diagnosed with ADHD. If you were going to give one or two uh, most essential life change that they should do to be able to help your kids, what should it be?
Well, the first thing I would say is join a support group.
Okay.
Okay, because you want to also find out and get to know parents who are along the same journey, so that you can learn from each other and also support each
Mm-hmm.
other. So Unlocking ADHD, we have a Facebook virtual support group. We have about 1,400 people there already, including some from the Philippines, actually. We have a Discord as well. So that's one way. The second thing is actually to find out as much as you can about ADHD, so that you know what to expect and how to support. And really spend that time to learn the tools, so that you can do your best for your child. I would say the third thing is, because of the genetic link I mentioned earlier, if a parent suspects that they might have ADHD because there's certain similarities in symptoms, I would strongly urge them to get themselves assessed. Because, like the airplane safety videos we all used to watch when we traveled, when the oxygen mask comes down, you put it on yourself first as an adult before you put it on the child. So to have a
Okay.
best chance of long-term management is to self-manage first before you manage your child.
Is there a test that we can do online to see if we have ADHD as parents?
There's a lot of self-tests, but in terms of
Okay.
clinical acceptance, is not there yet. So what people could do is do one of those self-tests, and then they will ask you all those symptoms, and then maybe print it out. Bring that
Okay.
self-test to the psychiatrist, and then specify, when you go and see the psychiatrist, what are those specific situations in your life that meet those symptoms. Because the more specific one can be, the easier it is for them to come to a diagnosis one way or the other. In Singapore, for the public hospitals, they also ask for things like your report book, or a family member to come with you if you're an adult. The report book thing is, 50-50. Some people actually do well in school, but they have ADHD. So it's not, like the most concrete evidence, but it does help for those who struggle. But the parent or a friend who has known you since a child is very useful, because for adult ADHD, the symptoms need to have come up before they were 12. So there has to be
Okay.
a certain pattern, and has to be impairment in one's life.
Okay. So there are several very, very, just to give a bit of hope, not a bit, but a lot of hope to the moms out there. There's actually a lot of very successful people that have ADHD, and I just read now it was like Michael Phelps, Albert
Yeah.
Einstein's, who else? Who else, Moon? Adam
Um,
Levine. So, don't worry about being
a lot
cool.
of
Adam Levine is
entertainers.
cool.
A lot of
Yeah.
entertainers and athletes. Simone
Adam Levine.
Biles, the Olympic
Yeah.
gymnast.
Yeah,
There is Richard
she's
Branson. Richard
yeah.
Branson from Virgin.
Yeah.
Ingvar Kamprad from IKEA.
Yeah.
And then Emma Watson, the actress. But more recently, there was this scientist that nobody really knows about, but has impacted us globally. His name is Dr. Kerry Mullis. He passed away
Mhm.
recently, but he was the inventor of the PCR test, and he won a
Oh.
Nobel Prize for that. Okay.
S-
Um,
So
so
so I
go
guess
figure.
that's the yeah. Some moms really, when they hear about ADHD, ASD and stuff, they all like feel that it's the end of the world. It's not. It's actually just your kids are unique. Not unique in the sense that, but everybody's wired differently. That's why I think now a lot of progression or different types of learning have been introduced, because we are learning that people are really made differently. And some people, like the ones with ADHD, just really are wired to see the world differently. Hence, they become very, very good at something. So that's it. So,
Yeah.
Moon, you want to talk to us about unlocking ADHD, where they can find you, and what kind of support that you guys give?
Yes, Unlocking ADHD, basically our mission is to empower ADHDers and their families to live life to the fullest. And you can find this at www.unlockingadhd.com. Just Google that word. We have a lot of resources to find out about what ADHD is and how to live a better life with ADHD for parents, for youth, and for adults. I'd just like to also share that, Dr. Edward Hallowell, who I mentioned earlier on, he talked about the ADHD brain being like a Ferrari engine, but with bicycle brakes. So the horsepower is
Oh,
there, the strength is there, but the brakes are not up to what is needed. So he said that his mission in life was to strengthen the brakes so that the cars can complete the turn safely and finish the race. So that's what we're trying to do there, to help people strengthen the bricks, because actually the engine is very good.
All right, thank you so much. All right, do you guys have upcoming events or something they can, sign up with, or some seminars?
We have them regularly. We have a monthly parent support, adult support, youth support. So please go to our website, follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Check out our YouTubes. All our previous events have been recorded and they're available 24/7. And it covers a whole bunch of topics, from gaming to medication to supporting your kids through exams, and also finding your strengths. So please visit our social media and our website.
Okay, thank you so much, Moon, for joining us. Thank you, thank you. We learned a lot today. I hope the moms out there, if you think your child has ADHD or is already diagnosed, don't worry. You're not alone. It's not the end of the world. It's actually just a new beginning of how to look at
Absolutely.
life and look at the world differently. There's gonna be a lot of learning on the way, but it's also gonna be ups and downs. But you have to understand that everybody has to deal with something. Some kids are some kids are born with like diabetes, or they have asthma. It's just another obstacle that will help make life more meaningful. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Moon. Hope to see you soon. Okay, so that's another fun and informative episode on Chicdriven Chats. Don't forget to watch us every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on our Facebook page and also our Instagram. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you would know when the new episodes come in. You can also catch some of my written works at on the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Lifestyle Asia, and OneMega.com. If you have suggested topics and guests for the show, please do let us know by messaging us on our social media accounts at Chicdriven, either on Facebook or Instagram, or commenting it down below. This has been Jeanette Ipapo-Tuason. Happy Mother's Day. I hope you had fun with us today. And this is Chicdriven Chats, your best life in bullet points.
I started unlocking ADHD for two reasons. The first one is hope, and the second one is gap. I started it because my daughter and I found hope in getting diagnosed and managing the condition. And my daughter went from someone that was failing out of school at secondary 3 and getting an L1 R5 points of 36 with nowhere to go and no dream on what she wanted to do, to someone that finished at L1 R5 of 14 with a dream to basically do better and do more. And you can see that in the space of less than 3 years, the transformation of someone who was, again, not having much hope in the future to someone that has a bright future. And I believe she's not unique. There are other children and young people in Singapore that may have ADHD but are not aware that they have it, and therefore they haven't been diagnosed. I believe that once they get the help they need, they can actually change their future, not just for this generation, but for the generation to come. The second reason is the gap. We found that when we were first diagnosed with ADHD, there really wasn't much information that we could get about how do you live with ADHD in Singapore and what are the different types of issues that we had to deal with, that we could get some resources for. So what I really hope to do with Unlocking ADHD is to provide the resources for the ADHD community so that we can understand about the condition more and learn how it affects our daily lives and live with it to the best possible. The mission of Unlocking ADHD is to empower ADHDers and their families to live life to the fullest. Let me explain. We can break it down into 3 different parts of our mission. The first one is the word empowering. ADHD is basically something you're born with. No one chooses to have it. So we use the word empowering because once you find out that you have the condition, you actually can do something about it to live life in a better way. The second part, ADHDers and their families. The focus has always been on the person with ADHD, but because of the genetic link, the family is also involved, and therefore you cannot leave the family out of the equation. And the third part is to live life to the fullest. We don't believe in just leveling the playing field with accommodations. We believe that it's perfectly fine, and we should aim higher. I would like Unlocking ADHD to be the go-to place for anything to do with ADHD. Whether someone is exploring whether they have ADHD or they have just been diagnosed, or they've had it for some time and looking for resources on how to live life better. Additionally, in the future, what we would like to do is to roll out programs to support the community better. And this includes having support groups based on demographics. Also in terms of coaching, whether it's parent coaching, youth coaching, adult coaching, or school support.